Just when you think you know everything about corn production, a new disease comes through the area and wow, it's learning all over again.
Yeah, now it wasn't necessarily a brand new disease. The disease we're talking about here is Goss's wilt, but this is the first year, this past year is the first year it showed up on our farm, and it hurt yield. I mean, not dramatically because it didn't show up late in the season, but I know it knocked 10 or 15 bushels off our yield because where we had it, that was one of our poorest yielding fields, and the rest of our stuff was pretty good. So this is an issue for a lot of farmers because 10 or 15 bushels now, you're talking $50, $80 an acre. That's a lot of money.
Well, just to clarify, the Goss's wilt got to our farm kind of late in the season, and much of the yield potential has already been determined in cornfields. By the time you've got tasseling, you've pollinated all those kernels. Yeah, it did hurt us a little bit at the very end, but it's not as bad as if that disease started, maybe before tasseling time, and then you had trouble filling those ears.
So anyway, with Goss's wilt, the thing you need to know, the most important thing, is that it's a bacterial disease. It is not a fungus, and because it's a bacterial disease, fungicides aren't going to work on it. So you can go out there and spray your headline post-emerge and say, oh, I got my diseases under control. Well, you have most of your diseases under control, but you don't have Goss's wilt taken care of. So what are you going to do? How are you going to manage this Goss's wilt if you can't control it with fungicides?
Okay, well, let's just start out here. Let's say that you have never had Goss's wilt before, but it's getting pretty close to your area. The first thing you want to look at is planting a tolerant variety. So you can look through your seed guides at all the different hybrids, and unfortunately, I don't care which company you're planting with, they all have trouble with this because they don't have very many hybrids that are very tolerant. Now the next thing is, if you already have Goss's wilt on your farm, you really have to watch out in corn on cornfields. Rotate to different crops if you can. Maybe you put in alfalfa for a few years. Maybe you put a soybean crop in between your corn in the rotation. You just have to do something because when you have corn on corn, that Goss's wilt can survive on that plant residue and pop up again even worse next year.
So besides making sure you're planting tolerant hybrids and you are not doing continuous corn, the next thing you want to do is consider using some tillage. Now, we don't always say you've got to use tillage because I realize when you till, you've got more erosion potential and you're going to have more moisture loss out in that field. But tillage does help bury that infected residue and it does help prevent the spread of Goss's wilt in the future.
The next thing you have to be careful is just having any damage to your corn plants in the field, whether that's from insects, whether it's from nature, whatever the case may be. Anytime you get your plant nicked up just a little bit, you're going to have an issue where diseases like Goss's wilt can enter and infect that plant. So do everything you can when you're out in your fields. If you notice, hey, I've got a few insects out here that are chewing on my corn leaves and Goss's is in the area, you need to be cautious about that. Kill those insects before they have all these open wounds starting to form on your plant leaves, and protect your plants as much as you can. I realize if it hails a little bit, there's not much you can do about that. The first thing I would do if I did have some hail though is get out with a fungicide. Now I realize those fungicides aren't going to stop Goss's wilt, but they will stop other diseases. And once you have other diseases in a plant, it weakens the plant and makes it more susceptible to things like Goss's wilt.
Finally, did you know that barnyard grass, green foxtail, and shattercane can all host Goss's wilt? In other words, try to keep your fields weed-free. If you've got a bunch of these grasses out there that could host Goss's wilt, even if you have done everything possible to prevent Goss's wilt in your field, besides this, when those grasses start getting the Goss's wilt, it's easy for it to spread from there into your corn.
Well, Goss's wilt was definitely a big issue this year, and it got further north than it has really in any year previously. We actually had some get up into our farm in southern South Dakota, and it even got north of us a little ways too. So keep an eye out for Goss's wilt. Just because you didn't have it on your farm this year, it's a disease that you should be familiar with and ready to deal with.
Well, we can say the same thing with our Weed of the Week. Even if you haven't had it yet, make sure you're prepared to fight this one. It's a tough one. We'll tell you how to get it under control on your farm later in the show.